The screaming started before the boxes were even unpacked. "Get off my land!" A man's voice, sharp, gravel rough, from somewhere across the tall grass. Grace spun around, one child on her hip, two others frozen mid-chase in the overgrown yard. Her oldest, Toby, dropped a stick sword. Her daughter, Lily, held a jar of fireflies, even though it was still daylight. The man came into view fast, flannel shirt, big boots, white beard like steel wool. He pointed a crooked cane at her kids as if it were a loaded weapon. "Didn't you see the boundary line?" Grace blinked. Sweat trickled down her spine. Her van door was still open, half the furniture was in the driveway, and her youngest, Jude, had just stuck a dandelion in his mouth. "I'm sorry," she said. "We just moved in. They were chasing a frog." "It's not a frog pond. It's my tomatoes." Toby looked back at the weeds. "I didn't see any tomatoes." The man jabbed his cane toward the collapsed wooden fence between the properties. "Because you broke through the damn fence." Grace squinted. The boards had already been leaning grayed, twisted, half-rotten, but now one was cracked clean in half. She hadn't even seen it before. "I'll fix it," he said quickly. "Damn right you will," the man snapped. "This isn't the city. Out here, we respect each other's lines." With that, he turned and stomped back through the weeds, vanishing behind a barn like a ghost with a limp. Jude started crying. That night, after the kids were finally asleep, one with a scraped knee, another with a headache from the heat, Grace stood on the back steps of the old farmhouse, staring at the slumped fence. Crickets whirred. A truck engine rumbled somewhere far off. The house behind her creaked and smelled like vinegar and plaster. The kitchen faucet leaked. The fridge rattled. But it was hers, or would be, if she could make the payments. The man's name was Ray Callahan. She'd seen it once on the old mailbox out front of his land. Say, people in town had told her he was difficult. Her realtor had said, "Just don't let your kids near his tool shed." Now she understood why. But broken or not, that fence, like everything else, was going to have to be her responsibility now. And it wasn't the only thing falling apart. The flashlight balanced on her shoulder kept slipping. Grace shifted it with her chin, squinting as she knelt in the tall grass, knees already wet with dew. The night air smelled like pine and rust. One nail at a time, she pulled the broken boards free. No power tools, just a hammer she borrowed from the kitchen drawer and a bag of nails she found in the basement. The kids were asleep, or at least pretending to be. She'd heard Lily whispering a bedtime story through the thin wall, making up a tale about a fence troll who punished children for crossing magic borders. Grace hadn't laughed, but now, in the dark, she almost could. She lined up a plank, old but solid, sourced from the barn out back, likely part of a shelf or stall. The wood creaked as she braced it, then drove the first nail in. The sound cracked sharp through the night. Somewhere across the field, a light clicked on, a porch bulb, yellow and flickering. She froze. The farmhouse across the property line, Ray Callahan sat silent, but she could feel it watching. The porch, the chair, maybe even the man himself behind a screen door. She waited. No shout, no cane tapping, no warning. Just crickets. She hammered the second nail. By the time the sky paled at the edges, 6 new boards stood where the hole had been, straight, steady, imperfect, but sturdy. Grace wiped her hands on her jeans and stood back, spine aching. She looked toward Ray's porch. The light was off now, door still closed. He'd seen her and said nothing. The next morning, she found a box on her back steps. Inside, a coil of fresh wire, a pack of screws, and a folded note in block letters. For the rest of it, use gloves. R.C. No signature, no kindness, just facts. But Grace smiled anyway, because out here, that was as close to thank you as she was going to get. And it was enough. Grace didn't hear him arrive. One moment, she was kneeling in the garden bed behind the house, trying to convince rock-hard soil to yield a single furrow. The next, a shovel sliced the ground beside her. She looked up. Ray Callahan stood over her, sleeves rolled to his elbows, an old Army-issued shovel in hand. No greeting, no eye contact, just a nod toward the bed. "You're digging wrong," he said. Grace blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're tearing the roots. You want to turn the soil, not fight it." He pushed the shovel in again, smooth, clean, years of knowing how things resist and how to move with them anyway. "I didn't ask for help," she muttered, wiping her forehead. "Didn't offer it." And that was that. They worked side by side for an hour. Ray didn't ask questions. Grace didn't push. The air filled with the scrape of metal and the rhythm of moving earth. At some point, Toby and Lily came to the edge of the yard, watching. "Is that the grumpy fence man?" Lily whispered. Toby nodded. "I think he's helping Mom." "Is he allowed?" "I don't know. Maybe just today." Jude toddled after a butterfly, muddy knees and all. Around noon, Grace brought out lemonade. She poured 2 glasses, set one near Ray's elbow. He didn't drink it right away, just kept digging. "You ever plant anything?" she asked finally. "Grew beans, once, in '79. How'd that go?" "Deer ate them." She stifled a laugh. "You ever think about trying again?" He paused, wiped his hands on a rag from his back pocket. "You ever think about not asking questions?" Now she did laugh, and he didn't stop her. That evening, the neighbor from 2 houses down, a gray-haired woman in a floral apron named Mabel, walked over holding a tray of cornbread. "I saw you 2 out here," she said, nodding toward Ray. "Figured if the town's oldest mule is digging in someone else's dirt, the least I can do is bake." Grace chuckled. "He didn't dig much, just corrected me." Ray muttered something about city girls and soft wrists, but took a piece of cornbread anyway, and stayed. They ate in the backyard, 3 kids, 2 adults, and Mabel with her thermos of mint tea. It wasn't a party. It wasn't even quiet. But it was the first time Grace didn't feel like she'd moved into someone else's leftover story. Maybe, just maybe, she was building her own. It started with a knock on the back door. Grace opened it to find a pile of lumber leaning against the porch. Clean cuts, labeled ends, a coil of rope, a canvas tool belt draped over the top like a signature. No note, but she didn't need one. Across the field, Ray Callahan was already in the old oak, halfway up a ladder he'd bolted into the trunk. "What are you doing?" she called. He didn't look down. "Tree picture, kids. Figured I'd listen." Then he kept hammering. For the next week, he came every morning after sunrise. He brought old boards from his barn, a crate of mismatched screws, and one dented thermos of coffee he never shared. He didn't ask for help, didn't offer conversation, just climbed, measured, sawed. Toby followed him like a shadow. Lily brought snacks, crackers, fruit slices, once a half-melted chocolate bar wrapped in a napkin. Jude watched from the grass, pointing upward and clapping when Ray lifted beams into place. The house in the tree took shape, a wide platform, short railing, a crooked ladder made from leftover fence posts. When Lily asked if it would have a name, Ray paused mid-saw and grunted. "How about no screaming up there?" She giggled. "That's too long." On the 5th day, the roof went up. On the 6th, Ray nailed a wooden sign to the side, 3 letters carved by hand. KTL. Grace squinted at it. "What's that mean?" "Kids. Tree. Loud," he said. She shook her head. "You're softer than you pretend." "Ah." He adjusted his cap. "You're nosier than you act." Later that afternoon, Grace stopped by the general store for eggs. Inside, the owner, a short woman with thick glasses named Carol, looked up and down with a knowing smile. "Heard Ray Callahan built your kids a treehouse." "More like he let them live under one," Grace replied. "Well, I'll be," Carol said. "Hasn't done a thing like that since his granddaughter stopped visiting. You must be something special." Grace didn't know what to say, so she just paid for the eggs and left, heart full of questions she wasn't ready to ask. That evening, as the sun turned the fields amber, Grace stood under the tree and watched her kids climb, laugh, dangle their legs from the edge. Ray sat in a chair below, whittling something from a stick. He didn't look up. "Thank you," she said. He just nodded, but that was enough. The old feed store had been empty for years. Its windows were dusty, one cracked. A rusted sign hung by a single chain. Inside, cobwebs, fallen shelves, and a faint smell of sunflower seeds and forgotten cardboard. Grace stood in the doorway, hands on her hips. Ray stood behind her, arms folded. "You really think this place can be saved?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, just walked in, kicked at a pile of debris, and nodded once. "I've seen worse." That afternoon, they swept floors and dragged out broken displays. Ray fixed the front steps while Grace measured the back wall for shelves. Toby and Lily chased each other between empty aisles, while Jude sat in the corner stacking lids from old paint cans. It wasn't a business yet, just a shell. But somehow, it felt full. Near sunset, they took a break outside. Ray sat on a cinder block. Grace handed him a bottle of water. "You ever think of opening a shop?" she asked. "Once," he said, then silence. She waited. "I thought maybe I'd turn this place into something when my granddaughter was little," he said slowly. "She loved making things. Lemon bars, soap, jewelry from beads." Grace sat beside him. "What happened?" Ray's eyes stayed on the ground. "My daughter, her mom died in a car wreck. Winter roads. I didn't handle it well." He rubbed his palms together. "People brought casseroles. I told them to leave. My granddaughter came to visit. I didn't say much, just sat in my chair." Grace nodded, saying nothing. "She stopped writing after a while, then stopped calling. I don't blame her. It's been 12 years. A wind blew through the grass. Jude sneezed somewhere inside. Ray cleared his throat. "This place was supposed to be for her, but I never opened the door." He looked at Grace. "But you did." They didn't hug, didn't cry. But when they stood, he handed her the old store key from his pocket. "I think the lock still works," he said. Grace smiled, eyes stinging. "Then let's make it worth opening." The flyer was glossy, professionally printed, and pinned to the bulletin board at Garrison's Feed Fuel. "Coming soon, the market on Mill Road. Locally curated, city quality, grand opening, June 12th. Grace stared at the photo. Kyle Denham, arms crossed in a crisp white shirt, standing in front of a brick storefront. His grin said, "You can try, but I'll win." She hadn't seen him before. But his store? It was going up right across the street from the one she and Ray were trying to bring back from the dead. Later that afternoon, she saw him in person. He pulled up in a black SUV, stepped out like the ground owed him thanks, and offered a handshake to everyone within reach, including Ray. "Name's Kyle," he said brightly. "Finally bringing some life to this sleepy corner. I hear someone else is trying the same?" His gaze slid to Grace. She nodded. "We're opening something small, local food, handmade goods." Kyle laughed. "That's sweet, like a lemonade stand for grown-ups." Ray didn't flinch, but his jaw locked. "We'll manage," Grace said evenly. Kyle leaned in a little. "Word of advice? Stay niche. People like me, we attract volume. Tourists, cash, buzz. You stick to pickles and potholders. I'll handle the real stuff." Then he flashed another smile and crossed the street, whistling. That evening, Mabel stopped by with a pie and a look. "Heard Kyle offered to buy your space," she said. Grace blinked. "What?" "Said it'd be easier than fighting the tide." She laughed, tight and flat. "We're not fighting, we're planting." Mabel smiled gently. "Just be careful, dear. Men like that don't need axes to chop down trees." Ray didn't say a word the rest of the night, but when he left, Grace noticed he'd started measuring for a second sign, something bigger, stronger. The next morning, someone knocked over the kids' lemonade stand, the one Lily had painted with sunflowers. Jude cried when he saw it. Ray picked it up. No words, just nailed the boards back together. Grace stood on the porch, arms folded tight. The breeze carried Kyle's music from across the road, lively, polished, loud. This was no longer just a project. This was a line in the dirt. And Grace knew she wasn't going to cross it alone. The door was hanging crooked when she arrived. Grace had just dropped Jude at Mabel's. He'd caught a fever and walked back toward the store. The late light made the glass gleam oddly, like water with something wrong beneath the surface. Then she saw it. The front window shattered, a jagged hole like a punch through hope. Paint splattered across the floor. One of Lily's flower drawings stomped into muddy footprints. She stopped. Her arms wouldn't move. Ray arrived 2 minutes later. He didn't ask what happened, didn't gasp, just stood beside her, looking through the wreckage as if the store had said something rude. Then he turned around. "Give me your phone." Grace blinked. "What?" "Phone, now." She handed it over. Ray tapped the screen, squinting. He called 3 people. By nightfall, 4 trucks lined the gravel lot. Mabel showed up with a lantern and a hammer. "No, Carol from the store brought plywood." A teenage boy named Miguel, who once mowed lawns for Ray, arrived with paint cans and a boombox. Grace stood at the counter trying to process. Ray looked her in the eye. "You built half a fence. Let me finish the rest." Then he turned to the others. "No speeches, no talk. We fix." The air buzzed with movement. Boards cut, nails driven, paint rolled over pane. Someone brought cocoa. Someone else turned on music, not loud, just steady. Toby swept broken glass with Carol. Lily hung new pictures on the back wall. Ray carved something slowly, carefully, into a slab of salvaged wood. By midnight, the broken window was sealed, the floor scrubbed, the space whole again. Not perfect, but stronger. Before leaving, Mabel put a hand on Grace's shoulder. "You didn't just bring this place back. You brought him back, too." Grace looked toward Ray. He was sweeping alone, whistling under his breath. And for the first time, it didn't sound like a lonely sound. The bell above the door jingled for the first time at 9:01 a.m. It was Miguel. He bought a jar of pickled carrots and paid in cash. He grinned like it was gold. At 9:17, Mabel arrived with a bag of wildflower bouquets and stayed to sell them herself. At 10:03, a couple passing through on a road trip bought 2 candles and a handmade dish towel. By noon, Grace stopped counting. The shelves were still half empty. The chalk sign out front was crooked, but the store buzzed. Kids giggled in the back. Someone started humming near the soaps. Ray stayed near the register, not behind it. He didn't need to be in charge. He just needed to see it working. At 2:40, a beat-up red sedan pulled into the gravel lot. Kyle Denham stepped out in mirrored sunglasses, holding a coffee from his own place across the road. He walked in, took a long look, and nodded once. "No bad for a bunch of amateurs," he said. "Almost has charm." Ray didn't respond. He just picked up a broom and started sweeping a spot that didn't need sweeping. Grace smiled. "We're not aiming for charm, just real." Kyle left without buying anything. They didn't mind. "Near closing time," Lily called from outside. "Mr. Ray, come see." Behind the store, the kids had hung paper flags between the treehouse and the porch railing. They read, "Welcome to the little store." Ray looked at them, blinking against the late sun. Then, for the first time anyone could remember, he smiled without sarcasm, without tension, just real. Grace stood beside him. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "I'm needed." She exhaled soft. "Me too." That night, under the string lights Mabel had brought and the stars that always seemed brighter in small towns, they sat on old crates and folding chairs, sharing lemonade and leftover cornbread. Nobody said we did it. Nobody needed to. It was in the laughter, the stories, the tired shoulders that still leaned toward each other. Sometimes, Ray thought, survival isn't about winning. It's about fixing the board someone else gave up on, and realizing they were fixing you too. What would you have done if your neighbor rebuilt your life one nail at a time? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and share if this story touched you.